All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jillian Estes, and I'm an EVV analyst here at the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing. And if you are here, you're here for the Electronic Visit Verification General Stakeholder Meeting. Today is January 20th, 2026. And so let's go ahead and kick things off. Just a little reminder before we get too far down. Want to let you know that if you want to follow along with the PowerPoint or download it, that is available on our stakeholder work group page, and I can pull that resource for you just as a little orientation. So give me a second. We'll pull up our chat box. There we go. See how we do. Okay, great. Right. So just a reminder that our mission here at HCPOF is improving healthcare equity, access, and outcomes for the people we serve while saving Coloradans money on healthcare and driving value for Colorado. What we do. So the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing administers the Health First Colorado, that's Colorado's Medicaid program, and Child Health Plan Plus, we call that CHIP, and other healthcare programs for Coloradans who qualify. So some meeting guidelines. We like to remind folks of this. Do not mention any PHI, that's protected health information, or PII, personal identifying information, such as Medicaid member numbers, names, that sort of thing, or provider IDs, etc. Instead, we ask that you use that evv@state.co.us inbox as a way to communicate with us for those more sensitive matters. And when you do that, we want to remind you to encrypt. Or protect, maybe reduce the amount of PHI, or not strip it really. But encryption is one of the best ways to make sure that gets to us safely. And so we're always reminding folks of that. So just a little reminder there. We ask in this time that you mind your e-manners. Raise your hand. That way we can call on you, identify yourself when speaking, share the air, listen for understanding, and stay solution and scope focused. So the purpose of today's meeting is to engage with providers, members, and other stakeholders here in Colorado for EVV related to maintenance and operation of EVV or EVV required services, and really specifically to clarify EVV in Colorado. So we discuss EVV program updates here, and we also gather stakeholder feedback. Now, today's agenda, we're going to be, we've already gone through that welcome and meeting overview piece. We're going to be talking about EVV program status and some key updates. We are just barely into 2026, so we've got some ground to cover, how 2025 went, et cetera. Live-in caregiver EVV exemption, compliance, oversight, and EVV resources, and we'll be doing a check-in there, operational lessons, and user experience. And then, of course, we'll be looking ahead to 2026, and we'll have some time for QA and stakeholder feedback. Now, one thing we'll do as we go through this time today, we've already said, raise your hand when you have a question or something like that. What I'd like to do is kind of go through a block of slides and get to that next section. We can pause there. You'll have an opportunity to ask your questions. So if you, if you'll do that for us, that'd be great. One thing to remember is we do have our chat. So if you do not feel comfortable raising your hand and speaking aloud, you can put your question in the chat and we can address it that way. So that's just a couple of ways that you can engage with us. And so I think that we can go ahead and get into that overview. I'm going to check a few boxes. So I've done some of the things I need to do to make sure that we have record of this. All right, folks. So first things first, if you're new to EVV, then we like to go over what this is, kind of level set for everyone. So EVV is electronic visit verification. It's a technology tool using mobile application, or what we refer to as MVV, telephony, or TVV, or web-based portal. So that confirms, those are the tools that confirm services in home and community are delivered. And the question being, let me adjust this a tiny bit, why EVV is used. So it confirms services are received in home or community. So it kind of gives us that location data. It captures where services occur. Again, is it telehealth or is it in, the community or a member's home? It also helps ensure caregivers are paid accurately for their time, and it maintains flexibility in how and where services are delivered. So EVV in Colorado is flexible in terms of service delivery locations. And in all cases, we want to make sure that we have those data points to support the visits. And so you might be asking, what are those data points? So as a reminder, even for those of you who've been in, what's the word I'm looking for, performing EVV for quite some time, just a little refresher on what those 6 data points are. So that's the type of service performed, that is the individual receiving the service, the date of service, the location of service delivery, individual providing service, and the time that the service begins and ends. So now, before I get too carried away, I got pretty excited. I want to also let you know that my colleague, Jordan Larson, is on the line. He's calling in today by phone, so he may have some additional comments as we move along in this time. And he's going to be supporting me and answering any questions you may have. So just a little reminder, Jordan, thank you for being here. I won't ask you to go into too much detail, just to conserve or preserve, unless you'd like to, of course.
No, that's okay. You covered it.
Okay, very good. Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Jordan. And thank you all for being here. Okay, so let's talk about EVV program status and key updates. So, I think it's important when you come to, we just got the state of the state address last week. So it's kind of the state of EVV in Colorado. So the program status where we are today. So just a reminder, statewide EVV program, it continues to operate across required services. And, we do have a few services that are included here in Colorado that may not be in other states. We are also noticing the program scale and participation continue to grow. We've had some launching, CFC launched this last year. And so we're seeing some growth, related to that, et cetera. Core EVV requirements and expectations remain unchanged, right? So EVV is required, or an exemption if you have a living caregiver is required. But in either case, one or the other for that EVV required services category, if you will. All right. So just to kind of give you some statistics, some information. We did this last year, and so we kind of liked the way that laid out for you, just so you have a good idea of where are we at in terms of program health. So program scale and participation, what's grown? So last year, just kind of giving you a heads up, last year we were at about 51,000 members. And so this year in 2025, that was an increase, as you can see, 57,632. So looking at about plus 6,000 members receiving EVV required services. And in terms of providers, last year we had around 1,100 providers rendering those EVV required services. As you can see, that number has increased. We're about plus 235 providers. So we are seeing some increase in that. We had some enrollment changes, that required people to disenroll and re-enroll. And so that could have kind of inflated those numbers. But, just kind of high level, these are what we're seeing in program growth terms. Let's talk about providers using an EVV system. So that's 97.83%. Last year we were at about, and when I say last year, I want to be clear, I'm talking 2024. So I need to make sure I'm very clear on that. So in 2024, we were at about 93%. So we're seeing stronger utilization. And, I think that comes across when people are billing for claims and they deny for EVV, and then they realize they're not enrolled in the program. So that can still happen. So if you know someone out there who's having some claims denials, and that's for EOB 3054, EVV required and not found, that could be why things are not being paid for them. So could be. Moving on to the providers out there who are using the state EVV solution. So of those 97.83% providers that have an EVV system, about 52%, 53% roughly, are using the state's free EVV solution. That is, like I said, it's free. It's very straightforward, but it's available and it's heavily adopted. Next, let's talk about those who are not using the state solution. We have 78 active provider choice systems in Colorado. These are EVV systems, sometimes referred to as an alt EVV system, that is interfaced in Colorado. They've gone through testing with SANdata, and they are set up to transmit EVV data. And so that's good to see. What that means is for folks who do not want to use the state solution, you have choices. 78 is a pretty high number, I would say. And just getting into the primary visit verification methods, we talked about MVV and TVV. So with that mobile visit verification, 56% of visits are completed that way or are verified using the mobile app. Meanwhile, we have about 21% that are being verified with telephony. So, you see that those numbers are pretty strong, and especially, that MVV. So, yeah, just kind of where are we at, what's grown, and I think we're seeing some really positive growth. Okay, so looking at EVV program performance, this is that year-over-year snapshot. And for the last couple of years, we have been monitoring and working towards performance improvement on unmodified EVV. So you can see, and just as a reminder for those of you who may be new, unmodified EVV, that's when all 6 verification data points are captured in real time, okay? That's at service delivery. There's no edits. There's no, oops, I clocked out too late, too early, and somebody has to fix it on the back end. It is everything was collected accurately, correctly when the visit occurred. That can also be referred to as auto-verified or auto-verification. But nonetheless, so EVV program unmodified performance trend in 2024, we were at 74%. 2025, it's a modest, but it is a stable 2% increase. I think that's a really positive way that we're going. We had announced back in 2024 our goal of 85% being where we wanted to end up. And while we're not at 85%, we are slowly but surely going that direction. As a little aside, providers have received unmodified EVV report cards since July 2023. We send those out directly. We send them to providers, specifically to their their service location email address. And so sometimes people will reach out and they'll say, I'm not getting that report. You'll want to go back into your provider web portal, that Gainwell portal, and just go to the service location address and see what is that address to know for sure who is getting it. Sometimes these emails end up in spam folders too. So, you might want to check there. All right. So in terms of program compliance and operations snapshot, EVV to claims match rate, this is kind of that first data point or first compliance point that we were looking at when the EVV program launched. And so what this is talking about is an EVV is present and it matched to a claim and it paid. So in 2024, 98.77% of claims matched to an EVV and paid. That's great, right? That means providers are being paid for services delivered. 2025, very steady, very solid, still in that 98%, 98.62%, tiny bit under, but very much solid and strong performance there. In terms of CDES EVV strikes, so if you're not a part of the Consumer Directed Attendance Support Services program, then you may not know or be familiar with this, but under CDES, that's a member-driven or consumer-driven support program, right? So members in that program can get health maintenance activities, they can receive personal care and homemaker, but it's all under CDES. They are essentially the employer. And so that kind of gives you a little idea of like how CDES differs from providers. The provider does all of that in provider-based care. So the difference is CDES, because it is kind of a micro agency, if you will. We have a EVV compliance program that has strikes associated with it. And what we have seen for those CDES members is throughout 2025, there were no strikes incurred. So that shows that EVV is being collected and it is matching to claims. And that is ultimately a strong indicator that there's EVV compliance, high EVV compliance in the CDES program. So let's just move on and talk about the program compliance and operations snapshot continued, right? So identified cases where billed units, this is some of the stuff we found, identified cases where billed units exceed EVV duration identified, and that's in the in-home support services program, personal care, and homemaker services. So what that means is there are providers out there billing more than they have EVV time for. So that's something that we've learned in 2025. And another piece is identify potential waste among home health therapy and nursing services. And what that did was that resulted in changes from what was the 2.5 hour unit to a 30 and 15-minute billing unit. So you can see how EVV is informing policy and informing changes that reduce waste and kind of create that fiscal alignment that we're working towards. And then department will continue to monitor. We do continue to monitor, identify, and address issues related to not just EVV noncompliance, because this data can tell us a lot of things, but noncompliance, fraud, waste, or abuse. And that is the original intent of electronic visit verification. And we want to talk about some of the resources that have come out this year. As you can see, the EVV newsletter, we relaunched that in August 2024. And we sent out 4 newsletters in 2025, not quite quarterly, but kind of as needed. As things came up, we wanted to collect that information and make it available for providers so that you can stay in the know. In addition, we released the operational memo 25-068, and that was that temporary pause of the provider portal EVV exemption process for living caregivers. We'll talk about that in a moment. The Living Caregiver Exemption Survey that was also distributed in December 2025, and kind of a follow-up to the provider portal, that EVV exemption panel that had launched in 2025. So really trying to have that feedback loop. So we've launched the tool. Let's hear about it. We got lots of feedback. We'll get into that in a moment. The other thing is we have some new reports coming out. They've just been released. So SANDATA EVV compliance and auto verification reports, as well as a fact sheet, have been released, and we're going to talk about those. So I think, let's move on to those verification reports. They are here, and it's pretty exciting to us. We have been working on this for quite some time to make sure that we understand the reports available and that we are providing you with a self-service tool and with clear understanding of how it works and how that's going to differ from the unmodified EVV performance report cards you've been receiving. Okay. Now this puts you in the driver's seat. You've always been in the driver's seat, but this gives you more information to act on. So as you can see here, SANDATA released those EVV auto verification reports. And basically what that means is that you now have reports to provide visibility into how EVV visits are automatically verified, right? So you can look at your caregivers. You can look at time blocks. There's different ways to look at those reports, but so now you have that visibility. It also supports transparency, consistency, and of course, data-driven improvements. And so that's what we're looking for with that unmodified or auto-verified compliance piece. And then, of course, if you use those reports regularly, that can reduce manual review and administrative burden over time. If you're kind of creating your own feedback loop, which is you're using the reports and you know who the caregivers are that need more support, you're able to maybe manage those or address those in a shorter window of time to get better behavior from your caregivers or better performance, right? Because we know that they're out there, they're trying to provide the services, they want to do a good job. Sometimes you got to help people a little bit more, and this helps you help them. So why this matters? So this aligns directly with the unmodified EVV initiative. Like I said, goal was 85%. We've gotten to 76%. This can help providers who are really trying to it really help all providers. And that's what we're looking for, is that all providers use these reports so that they can improve their performance. It supports a more streamlined and standardized EVV experience. And it advances our shared goals, that accuracy piece, that efficiency and accountability, and really, that unmodified, because, I think the point of unmodified EVV is really at the heart of what EVV is and was at inception. So reports available today. There are 3 of them. One is the EVV auto verification detail report, and another is the EVV auto verification summary report. And then a third one, which is EVV compliance reports. And those are found in the SANDATA EVV portal. So if you have not used your portal or reports in your portal, then this is an opportunity for you to say, okay, I think there's something in there that I really do need. And so the way that works, I'll just kind of talk you through some of this. When you go in to do either visit maintenance, if you're a state EVV solution utilizer, or if you're a provider choice system utilizer, and you're making sure you do that pass-through check to make sure EVV in your alt system is coming over to the aggregator. While you're doing those things, this is an opportunity to kind of look over to the left, and in the SAN data tool, you'll see that blue bar on the left, and it says reports. You can go into that section and you can pull these reports and start looking at them. And, we know that in order for you to really effectively use these new reports, you need a little information. So we're just doing high level stuff today, but we did create a fact sheet, and we'll put that in the chat in just a moment. So the EVV auto verification fact sheet, some of the key takeaways on that document. First and foremost, it's on the EVV resources page. I think I can pull that probably quicker than not, so give me a moment. And you will see this under the department guidance section. So I'll just say, there we go. All right, so it's the second one from the top. You'll see that EVV program manual page and unmodified EVV reporting fact sheet, and that was released January 2026. So that's just a little reference. That's where it lives. So basically, you've got auto verified, and as I've already said, auto verified is the equivalent of an unmodified visit. So we have been sending out performance reports on unmodified visits, and that means a visit with no manual edits. And the reports that you have access to now is the auto verified version. Okay, so similar, same in some cases, but we'll get into like how they differ. So you've got EVV reports are visit based. They're not claims based. This is a really key differentiator, you might say, between the performance reports we've provided and the reports you now have access to. We do expect there to be differences in those performance numbers. I think that needs to be said, and you'll get a little more information in that fact sheet overview. One highlight I want to call out is with the performance report cards, those are based on claims payments, right? So they're an EVV that was unmodified or auto verified, matched to a claim, and for that month that we are reporting on. Okay, so that's what we've been sharing with you. What you will have access to in these reports is not the claims payment piece. Okay, so this is how you're doing before the EVV is matched to a claim. So I want to make sure that's clear, and we call that out again in the fact sheet. So regular review obviously is going to reduce edits, and it's going to support your EVV compliance. And as you can see, we've got that linked here on the page as well. So that's pretty exciting stuff. I'm not a super transitioner when it comes to pulling these things up in real time, but I'm going to pause there because we have given you a lot of information, and some of it's pretty exciting, and hopefully you're excited to be a provider out there who is performing well with unmodified EVV and excited to have some of these tools. So yeah, I'll stop there. If you have any questions, if you don't mind, take a moment, raise your hand, and I'm calling you, or if you want to put something in the chat, that would be great too. Yes, I think I see a Tracy. Yeah, go ahead, Tracy.
Hi, Julian. It's Tracy from the Independent Center in Colorado Springs. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Perfect. I'm in the car, so multitasking. So, it's my question is probably going to be later in your presentation, but I am going to have to pop off here soon.
Okay.
Feel really good about pretty much most of what you shared. My big question is around exceptions. So, with the portal, we're no longer uploading to the portal. So I have one client with dual parent homes. And so in the past, I had to send those for approval from HCPF. First question is, do I have to send those still for approval for my divorced parents who have equal custody of their kiddos?
Okay. So just for everybody on the line, so what Tracy's talking about is that EVV exemption process that we initiated last year. And it is on pause currently, but what is the requirement or what is the responsibility of the provider today? Is that a fair assessment, Tracy?
That is very fair.
Okay, great. So what's really happening is we're not asking you to use the portal. However, you still need to maintain that documentation for those parents, right? That's fact number one. And then secondly, when it comes to the kind of circumstances you're describing, Tracy, that fall in the extenuating circumstances category that require HCPF pre-approval, that process is still in place. That did not change. So when you have parents that have a joint custody situation or some other extenuating circumstance, those are still coming to the department today. We're still reviewing them. It's kind of as though the original process has not changed. The added piece of that portal and uploading documentation there, that's the piece that's been put on hold. But everything else remains the same.
Okay, perfect. And then I have two other clients with the true extenuating circumstances, and that one is like they meet the old requirements of the 100 and whatever hours per week, but I realize now, we need to send those to you. I've been just hanging on to them. I have all the documentation. I just haven't been sending it. So I have two different clients who require that. So we'll just send them to the EBV HCPF web email address. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Yeah. So that's evv@state.co.us. And, just kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, Tracy, the Department of Labor, 120 hours, extended periods of time, determination, historically that fell under like a Part B. And that was really hard for a lot of providers out there to kind of navigate, like, oh, are they, aren't they? And so that, kind of shifted over to the extenuating circumstances so that there was that you might say department support in reviewing, what the circumstances are. But just to clarify for folks on the phone.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we'll get those sent over. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Tracy. Appreciate the question. All right, Tyler Daniels, I see you. And so, thanks for being here. What's your question?
Hi there, Tyler with Apex Caring Services in Denver. I put it in the Q&A and I think I should have put it in the chat. I apologize, but I'm seeing a number of claims rejected in Gainwell for missed EVV requirements. But then when I go back to SAN data, there's no exceptions in SAN data.
Okay.
We use an aggregator with a third-party system, and then I'm also seeing in SAN data there are exceptions for location missing, and then I go back to our third-party system, and all of the data was sent, including location ID and GPS coordinates, to SAN data. So there's a couple times, and it seems random. So I was just curious if you guys are aware of any of those issues, but that obviously requires a number of unnecessary exceptions because I kind of got to go break the system into working when it should have worked the whole time.
Yeah. Okay. So Tyler, I'm listening to that and I'm thinking that, the first thing I want to stop at is the claims rejection and just making sure that you're seeing the EOB 3054 because there's also EOB 3056. That is an EVV exemption is required and not found. That's when you're billing for an exemption, like place of service 99, let's say. The system is looking for an exemption. So I want to make sure that, for folks who are on the line, if you see an EOB 3056, that claim it should not be denying for that. But if you're saying I'm seeing true denials and it's 3054, then we'll go on to the other concern you brought up.
Correct. Yeah. When I search SAN data for, any exceptions, obviously sometimes there's one show up and there's, whatever I got to fix. But there have been multiple claims denials for 3054.
Okay.
And when I go into SAN data for that particular client over that time period, there are no exceptions. So it's just, so for some reason that's not communicating to Gainwell. So then the claims are getting rejected.
Okay. So
I've called both parties and they both point the finger at each other.
Interesting. Do you use a third-party system and you don't have to call them out necessarily? What I'm thinking, Tyler, is probably going to make the most sense. Is do you have an email in our inbox right now telling us about this, or is this the first time you've expressed it?
No, I've kind of been trying to troubleshoot it myself, so I can draft something and show some examples.
Yeah, I would love to look. Give me some claim numbers.
Okay.
That way we don't need any PHI. But yeah, if we can get some claim numbers and let me know who your alt vendor system is. So back this last summer, we had some Oh, some system well, not so much enhancements, but I guess some refinements made in the SAN system. And that was around location. So visits coming in without location. And so that adjustment was made to catch visits that may have been coming in under verified when there was a missing data element. And so, just kind of looking at that and saying, okay, that's been tightened up. You may be seeing what looks like verified on your side in your system, but maybe it's coming over and maybe it's not addressing, sometimes you have to enter a location in the note field. Like there are some other things that are part of that work. So you may see that because of
I
that.
think there's two. I mean, I'm kind of bringing up two issues at once, and I apologize. So there are times where SAN aggregator shows no location. My third-party system shows it sent location information, but for some reason it didn't feed into the aggregator. So to fix that, I have to basically location override in my third-party system, and then it clears in SAN. That's issue number one. Issue number two is when claims get processed in Gainwell, not those specific location claims, if randomly, claims that get processed in Gainwell have error 3054, even though there is no exception on that same claim in SAN. So there's kind of two pieces. There's a problem in the front end sometimes. There's a problem in the back end, and I kind of have to fix it in the middle. So I can send you some detail. I don't want to monopolize the chat. It sounds like somebody else is having the same issue though.
Yeah, one thing I want to say before we totally, move on to the next one is, like you said, I got two different things going on. The first one is like that location piece and making sure I've got that verified visit all 6 data points. Great. Then the other thing is the billing piece, right? Sometimes inadvertently you can bill for a claim before the EVV is totally verified and has moved from SAN system into Gainwell system. So if I were just, and I'm only guessing here, those are the most common things that happen. So once you send those claims, we'll pin it down. But I'm pretty sure that maybe there was like a thought, but not a check of that EVV is verified. And I looked at, because you can look at the history of it and see when it was exported into Gainwell system. So that could be the disconnect. But we'll certainly find out.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's see here. Thanks. We always appreciate the feedback, guys. I'm gonna, Alec, give me just a second. We'll look back in the chat since I've got so many things in front of me. The pause in EVV. Okay, so backing up a tiny bit, somebody says that they have the same issue as Tyler. And so hopefully that information that I've given kind of high level has some utility for you. And again, same thing I've asked of Tyler is just send us that email, send us some claims, and we can, dig into it and find out more. Devin Petrero. So the pause in EVV documentation is only for living caregivers, correct? Everyone else still needs to use. That is correct. Yes. And I think somebody might have, never mind. It looks like this is an agenda item coming later. Yes. So EVV historically is collect EVV. And if you're not collecting EVV, there needs to be an EVV exemption, living caregiver exemption in place, right? Like think of EVV as an entire bucket or an entire circle. And so you're either going to be one or the other, right? But there's no category where an EVV required service is delivered and you don't have EVV or you don't have an exemption. So I think kind of in a nutshell, that might answer that, Devin.
It did. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no
I'm going to take this back to the team. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes. Good deal. All right. Alec Kasner, great to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So just before I ask my question, we've seen these delays between communication between the aggregator and Gainwell, time and time again. So when you get these 3054, sometimes we just, sent repushed the EVV data and resent the billing file, and without actually going in and doing anything in the with the EVV itself, it usually gets paid. So that's just something to try. But my question, Jillian, was maybe you just went a little bit fast for me, or I was spacing out. These new report cards, how do we get them? Do we go on a web page and download them, or is that something that will arrive in the email? I kind of completely missed that part.
Yeah, so we are putting some information in a couple of places, but here we are in real time with an opportunity. So thanks for asking. The first thing I want to do, Alec, is, I think that fact sheet is going to be helpful. And I did explain this, but I'm happy to go ahead and give that information again. First and foremost, let me drop this in the chat. So this is the EVV unmodified. Well, I say unmodified. I guess I need to say audit verification. Audio verification reports fact sheet. What you would do is you would go into your aggregator, into your portal, and on the typically, I think this is how it's set up for everybody. You'll see that blue bar on the left side, and you'll see a little tab that says reports. And when you see that, you simply, just like you would if you were doing a client listing report or something like that, you click on those reports, and then it will have your, I want to say, daily reports and date range reports. These reports we're sharing with you today are date range reports. Once you select date range, then you can go through and find those reports on the right side. Now, there is also in that resource, folks, for those of you who are listening in, and maybe you're sitting at your computer and you're going into the portal, the SANdata EVV portal, you can pop in there, and on that left side, you also have what's called, I think it's referred to as online manual. The online manual tells you about all the tools and offerings of the SANdata portal, and that also includes these reports. It gives you some high level, gives you some snapshots of what the report looks like, gives you the data, the headers that are being collected in that report, that sort of thing. So high level, Alec, is that kind of getting to what you were trying to find out?
Yeah, no, I completely just missed the part where you have to go into the aggregator and then go to reports. I'm sure once I get there, I can then find it. So
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for this.
Yeah. Hey, and Alec, and this goes for everyone on the line. As you start to use these reports and the fact sheet, we're always interested in that feedback to make things better. So, if you see something you're like, oh, this could be, I want the department to know about this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know how those reports are working for you and how that fact sheet is supporting your use. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, then let's go ahead and move into the temporary pause of the provider portal EVV exemption process for those living caregivers. And this is probably, we're a stable program, so there's not going to be a whole lot of changes and new topics, but when they do happen, they can be pretty significant. So first things first, just talking about current state, the EVV exemption. So yes, we are in a temporary pause of the provider portal EVV exemption process for living caregivers. That pause does apply to new submissions through the provider web portal. And what that means is if you've uploaded one successfully, that existing living caregiver exemption does remain valid. And for the ones that you were not able to upload, and that's going to take some time, that you were not able to upload, let me just stop there. Those you still need to maintain the documentation at your agency, right? So regardless of whether this process is on pause, the expectation and the responsibility to maintain the documentation, to review on an annual basis, all of those things are still present, okay? So what's not changing? Living caregiver exemptions remain available under this existing criteria, right, or this existing process. We're just not using that panel at this moment. EVV requirements for other services remain unchanged, right? So like Devin had asked a moment ago, if they don't have an exemption, is the whole thing on pause, like EVV and EVV exemptions? No. Everything in terms of documentation and collection is still in place. The utilization of that panel in that portal is on pause. Okay, claims processing for services with valid exemptions not impacted. I think it's important to remind folks that, a moment ago I talked about EOB 3056. When we launched this panel back in 2025, we had said in the operational memo or the policy memo, I can't remember which, that basically this is a soft launch. So you're going to get the feedback on your remittance advice, the EOB, but you're not going to get the claim payment impact, okay? That's specific to the EVV exemption. So just calling that out, making sure people are aware of that, that still remains that way today. No retroactive action related to the pause. We're not asking anybody to do anything retroactively. All of this documentation should have been maintained along the way, even if it didn't get uploaded in the system. Again, the expectation is that it's still maintained. All right, so background, that 2025 process changes. So new EVV exemption approval and record retention process launched in 2025. This is a little background, folks, for those of you who may not be aware. That's where we introduced the Gainwell provider portal EVV exemption panel that you would go in there, you'd use the ATN or provider maintenance process to submit your exemptions. Those would be they would be reviewed and approved and filed away in that portal. So that's using that ATN process. It was kind of a standardization of review and documentation, all living in that same place. Reminder that we do and are using a phased implementation approach, which is pretty typical in the EVV space. So just a reminder of like, where did we come from? So during this process of launching the panel to now, we have heard plenty of feedback, and we want to thank you for taking the time to say, hey, this is what I'm noticing. So we received it from providers and stakeholders of different kinds, mainly through email, stakeholder meetings, and survey. So we had tried to put out some different ways, like obviously freeform, you have a problem or a concern or a theme is coming up, to send that to us, but also, just kind of creating some more standardized ways like that survey. So we heard you. Process did not function as intended at scale. The pause is intended to allow time to address operational challenges. That's what we're working on here at the department. And, essentially just ensuring changes support both compliance and usability at scale. That's what we heard, why we paused, and where we're going. So during this pause, what that's going to allow us to do is review your feedback, which we have been doing all along, and those operational impacts. Also to assess the system's functionality and the workflow alignment. We heard that, the way the ATN process works, some of the limitations in the file size, things of that nature have created some challenges. Clarifying guidance and expectations. That's kind of helped us with that piece as well. And then determining next steps before we resume the process. So, we are working on that actively to see what is the best path forward. And this is based a lot on your feedback. So the key takeaways for providers and members, the living caregiver exemption documentation, that record keeping responsibility remains required. And that's for auditing purposes and just, making sure that, the exemption is actually in place. The provider portal exemption submission process is temporarily paused, but it is available should you want to use it. No action is required unless otherwise notified. We will tell you when it's time to change gears or to do something, or we'll notify you rather. Updates will be communicated through our usual and established EVV channels. We have our EVV newsletter. If you're not familiar with it, please subscribe. And direct emails, we do those from time to time, especially when we're sending out report cards, and a little, and then provider bulletins. Those are the three main pathways. So before we move into compliance oversight and EVV data use, I want to call attention to the fact that it's 11:13. So I was moving smoothly, and then I got I got off track. So apologies. We're going to try to cover this as well as we can. Tyler, let's go ahead and hear your question.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. So I know the uploading to the portal and all that stuff's paused, and we're maintaining records. And there's been a lot of state changes, so I apologize if I'm getting things kind of mixed up here. But at one point, there was a requirement to update that information. Is it annually in the form annually? Is that correct?
That is still true. You want to review it annually and make sure, does this member and caregiver, do they still live together? Because that impacts your billing. Mm-hmm.
We should refresh, even though we're not uploading it, we should refresh the form documentation annually during this pause process.
Yeah. Everything that is kind of in the responsibility realm, like I can't bill for this if I don't know they actually live together. I should be collecting EVD. You want to make sure that you're covered there.
Of course. Thank you.
No problem. All right, Megan, let's go ahead and hear your question.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to just double check I'm understanding this right. With the pause of using the portal for EVV live-in exemptions, you just collect the documentation and keep it on your own personal files at your agency. I have run into the issue when then having billing submitted. I've been getting the EOB of 3054 that the record's required and not found. So is there some step I'm missing to allow for an exemption to run through billing? Does that make sense?
It does. The most common reason that happens is you're either billing. What kind of services do you provide? Are they like personal care, homemaker,
Yeah,
or
I
is it
think the ones that were specific to that code were homemaker.
okay? So again, very common that a provider may bill. Let's see, they may bill the incorrect place of service because what tells the system that this is a living caregiver is depending on it's like UB 04 and CMS 1500. So it's either condition code 23 that says, hey, system, this is a living caregiver and they're EVV exempt, or it's place of service 99 for eligible services that says, hey, system, this claim I'm billing is for an EVV exempt member and caregiver combination. Okay, so if you're billing for those and maybe you are billing place of service 12, that tells the system that's
Okay,
home and it will say, well, where's your EVV? So that's kind of the layman's terms of what that claim edit and what you're seeing likely.
got it. And so updating that, is that where you need to update it to, is it 99? Am I remembering correctly?
Yes, and we do have, I think we still have that documentation on our EVV resources page. And
Okay,
so
perfect.
if you go to that, there should be a living caregiver section and a memo in there. In that memo that predates the temporary pause, we laid out the billing, sort of the operationalized billing steps. Okay, so that's there to kind of help shore that up for you. Okay, Megan?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, folks. Well, like I said, it's 11:17. Let's go ahead and keep moving. These could be fairly short slides, so we'll just see what we can do. All right, so compliance and oversight. Just a reminder, what has not changed? So in Colorado EVV, the oversight approach remains consistent, remains the same. We're looking at unmodified EVV trends, right? Collecting EVV in real time. We are also continuing to monitor those EVV to claims match rates. That was kind of like the first step out of the gate when we, were getting ready to turn on the EVV claim edit. Can you get your EVV to match to a claim? So we're still monitoring that. That tells us, how the health of the program is. Then we're talking about system adoption and usage. We went through those statistics earlier on. Strong compliance with those areas. EVV data is reviewed at the program level. That's what we do with this data, across the state. Not necessarily visit by visit. If there's something that comes out that needs to be looked at that way, then it can be reviewed, and that's that visibility thing and oversight we're always talking about. But ultimately, that visit level of detail, that is really helpful to the provider, as you're monitoring the services you're delivering or providing with your agency. But again, those things have not changed. Talking about EVV data kind of globally, holistically, how is it used? Well, it's used for program monitoring and reporting. It's for federal compliance and CMS reporting. That's Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Identification of trends and technical issues. It tells us those things. When we see little blips and ups and downs, that kind of helps us know, oh, wait, something may be going on. Maybe that's with the system. Maybe that's with a policy change, CFC launch, and there are lots of things, but it kind of gives us that visibility into the program's health and service delivery. How EVV data is not used. Historically, when we were kicking this program off, people had a lot of concerns. What is EVV doing? Is it tracking me everywhere? Is it tracking me all the time? And so, just kind of a reminder, it's not used to change service eligibility. It's not used to replace clinical judgment. It's not used as the sole basis for adverse action. And it's not used to track people. It's used to identify where services are being delivered. So, I was telling Devin earlier, EVV and exemptions, if you look at that as like the whole EVV required service bucket or category, or, however you want to say that, basically, EVV confirms service delivery when there is not an exemption in place. When an exemption is in place, there will not be any EVV usually. Some agencies still have a policy where they're collecting, but that's not to get into the details. But anyways, you're either collecting EVV for a visit or a service, or you have an exemption in place for services delivered that are under that EVV umbrella. So just a little like reminder, that's how they interact. That's kind of the totality of the program. So operational lessons and user experience, this is part of that lessons learned aspect of things. And so, EVV operating at scale, what we've learned, so EVV is operating at a significant and growing scale. We've seen that in the numbers. We're 6,000 plus on members. We're 200 plus on providers. So we are seeing that continue to grow. And most providers are successfully using EVV in real time, as indicated by that 76%. So, I think that deserves a high five. We can't forget to celebrate our wins. And I think there's a lot of providers out there doing a lot of good things and trying to do the best that they can. So we want to say thank you for taking that seriously. We've got operational challenges, tend to be process related, not policy related. So there can be, like we were talking about moments ago about the transmission of information from one system to another system. Those things do happen, but it's not typically associated with the policy. Because in terms of EVV policy, it's really hasn't changed. Still the requirements are you've got to collect the information so that you can get the claims, get paid for claims and services delivered. Okay, common operational themes we hear. So talking about administrative burden and certain workflows, whether that's use an alt vendor system, you're trying to get it from this system to that system, and then, get your claims paid, that we've heard, from people in the call today. Timing and clarity of guidance, we've heard that, in some cases when a change happens and regardless of what that change is, the notice of that for preparation is important, and especially to try to keep the amount of disruption or just kind of keep things as smooth and really just as smooth as possible, right? And just kind of help you adapt and adjust as needed before the change occurs. So really hearing that timing and clarity there. System usability differences across DVV solutions. That's kind of the bottom line is if you're using the state solution, there tends to be very few hiccups along the way. It's not to say they don't happen, but when it comes to a third-party system, an alt EVV or a provider choice system, because that is a system that's set up its own way and it has to align, it has to interface in order to send the data it collects for the reasons it collects it into the aggregator. There can be hiccups, there can be snags. And so, that is a common operational theme of, system usability and, this vendor, that vendor, just maybe there's some trouble in, like we said earlier, the tightening of that enhancement or that system enforcement and the downstream impacts. At the end of the day, it's really the responsibility of providers when they're using a third-party system, to make sure that third-party system is working, is compliant with EVV in Colorado. So, if you're running into issues like that, you may consider, sometimes you got to look at a different vendor. Sometimes you may need to go back to the state solution, but, just kind of those are the themes that we've heard. So how feedback has informed adjustments. So, we talked about the living caregiver exemption panel and making adjustments there based on your feedback. Thank you. That temporary pause, to help support us in reducing friction for you guys, reducing that burden and making some changes that are going to make some improvements. We've also heard from providers as an aside that there's some of you out there who want to be part of like any kind of trials or piloting or anything like that. We appreciate that interactive and collaborative approach. So thank you. And of course, emphasis on clarity before implementation. It's always nice to know on the front end what is changing, what is happening, and how can we prepare for it. So, we've heard that, and we are certainly taking that seriously and trying to adjust as we go. Okay, so user experience, what matters most? So what we heard is clear expectations, predictable processes, and timely communication. When those things are in place, gotcha. So Rosemary Ocampo, thank you. Send us an email and let us know that, because we're keeping a list of you folks that are like, we want to trial, we want to pilot, we want to collaborate or, collaborate really with the department. So user experience, like I said, clear expectations, predictable processes, and timely communication. That is just kind of makes sense, right? In that feedback loop. So lastly, looking ahead to 2026. So what to expect in 2026, this is high level. continued operation of the statewide EVV program. For those of you who are like, so is this all stopping? No, it's not. Everything is continuing as it has been. Ongoing focus on clarity, usability, and communication. We want to communicate with you when changes are coming. That way you can prepare. Targeted adjustments informed by feedback. You'll notice that there was a survey that went out recently, and that was an opportunity for you to kind of structure your feedback. And we have a nice, kind of compact list of what are we really hearing? What are the themes? Then, lastly, just an updated process for the live-in caregiver exemptions. Those are coming. We'll announce that when we get to that point, but, we're just kind of making sure that, we've heard you and we are working on this process to be better. So focus areas for 2026, that, involves improving clarity of EVV guidance and expectations, supporting provider understanding and compliance, and then strengthening communication and feedback loops. We realize that's the whole point of stakeholder engagement, right? So you have a change coming or something that needs to change, and you get that feedback, because we can't see it all. You guys have your perspectives, and so we bring all of that together so that we can inform a process that works. So stakeholder engagement and feedback in 2026. Continued EVV communications through established channels. Don't forget, subscribe for our EVV newsletter. The provider bulletin, that's another way to stay informed. And our direct emails or our targeted emails, I want to remind you that we've been talking about sunsetting the unmodified performance report cards. And so that will be happening now that we've got these self-service auto verification reports, but we will give you some notice, and that will probably come in the report card itself, right? So we'll continue that messaging there. So that's where you get those targeted emails. And opportunities for stakeholder input as needed. So just a reminder there, and that we do have a survey planned for EVV kind of generally speaking in 2026. And while we don't have that pinned down exactly when it's going to go out, again, we'll put that in the newsletter, kind of let you know it's coming, and that way you can prepare for it. So it is 11:27, and as you can see, we had more to talk about than I realized. So if there are any questions at this moment, let's go ahead and open it up so we can take those. And if something occurs to you after the fact, by all means, email us at evv@state.co.us. Okay, I'm not hearing any, and I'm not rushing, but if something pops up, let me know. In the meantime, our contact information, like I said, contact us, evv@state.co.us. My name is Jillian Estes. I'm an EVV analyst. You have my email address here. It's jillian.estes@state.co.us. My colleague, Jordan Larson, also my co-EVV analyst, jordan.larson@state.co.us. And if you are just looking for these resources that we've talked about today, you can go to our EVV website, and that is hcpf. You'll often hear us call that hicpuff.colorado.gov/EVV. So that's where everything EVV lives in Colorado. So by all means, go check it out, and check out that new resource. And again, we're always interested in feedback. So, send us the email once you start to dive into these new reports. Anything that you find particularly interesting, we're kind of like to know what's going on out there. So thanks, guys. So 11:29, not seeing any questions in the chat. I don't see any hands raised. So I'm going to take it that we're at time. There's nothing left outstanding. We want to thank you all for being here today. It's always good to engage with you. We continue ad hoc general stakeholder meetings. So, as needed, that's when we'll hold them, and we'll give you notice beforehand. So without further ado, thank you so much, Davin and Alec and everybody on the call today. Rosemary, like I said, please go ahead and email us. Let us know that you're interested in being one of our collaborators. So appreciate it very much. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year, and we will talk to you soon.